Welcome everybody to episode 14 of the Beta Academy Pandemic Podcast. I'm your host, Nakapan, and your co-host, of course, Lewis. Today, our special guest is BJJ Black Belt Professor Andrew Smith. He is a longtime practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He is the founder of Revolution BJJ and managing partner of US Grappling. Andrew, how you doing?
Well, hey, buddy. Great to see you, Nakapan, always, man. I'm happy to be here. You know, how am I doing is kind of a weird question. I think you have to take that with a grain of salt all year long for most people. But I remain, optimistic. I try to see the opportunities in any kind of a weird crisis type situation. We've all got to come together and support one another through this. But you and I have talked a lot about this. Crazy times do yield great leaps forward for humanity and for people. And I think that does include jiu-jitsu, although it may not look like that right now from where gym owners are standing.
Jiu-jitsu seems to be almost illegal at this point. So
Jiu-jitsu is illegal.
Yeah, well, you know what? It depends on what state you live in,
you know what? You're right.
It's still legal. So that's kind of the weird thing about it. And, we'll get into that later on into this segment. But I want to ask you a little bit about how you got started in martial arts, whether it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu you got started in, how it affected your life, what kind of brought you to it, and yeah, man, take it away.
Well, sure. Okay. Like most kids, I grew up watching, Kung Fu on TV and The Karate Kid and stuff like that in movie theaters. And, I always liked ninjas and stuff like that, right? This is before the days of Ninja Turtles, but not too much before. And so Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow were my favorite G.I. Joe characters. I think that's probably true for most kids that were my age growing up. I mean, everybody loved those guys. So anyway, popular culture heavily pushed me in the direction of martial arts and back then it was kind of the mysticism, the sort of Kwai Chang Caine would do a little tiny move and all kinds of crazy stuff would happen. So I think because of the popular culture, I was just transfixed by the leverage aspect of it, the fact that you could just kind of be this weak, wimpy guy like Daniel LaRusso or something and just kind of move out of the way and magic would happen, And it's pretty funny looking back and thinking how much utter nonsense a movie like Karate Kid is in some ways. You have to train really hard to get good at anything. You have to, the real lessons should be the way they were training at Cobra Kai was a lot more like what you have to do in order to get good at anything.
That's right. Danielson was the bully.
If you're right, no can defend.
But going forward, but there were some good things too, of course, right? Like the idea that intelligence and leverage sort of overcome things. And so anyway, man, I think I was just indoctrinated with that very young, and maybe took a summer school karate class. I think it was 2 or 3 months when I was 10 or something. And, I loved it. I was obsessed, but then we couldn't afford to go back to karate for the year, because martial arts wasn't cheap. It's still not particularly cheap. I mean, we have very real expenses as owners and stuff like that. So fast forward a few years, and I found wrestling in high school. So I was 13 when I started wrestling. I wasn't good. I was terrible. But I got to wrestle for a few years, and I really liked it, and it really clicked for me. And I think why it sort of resonated was I had testosterone in my body for the first time. I was it was coursing through my veins, and I wanted to be rough. I liked tackle football and stuff like that. But B, I had a really, really good coach in wrestling, and I had several coaches, but Ken Wilson was a really good coach. He was from the Midwest, really old school guy, hard-nosed, tough, taught me a lot about toughness, but also a technician, and I think that was the thing that really stuck with me was you could sort of outthink somebody in wrestling. Lucky for me, because I was not the strongest guy in the world. I was a lanky kid. I've always been built this weird, I've got long arms and I'm skinny and stuff like that for my frame. But I've always been flexible too. And I noticed you could use the attributes of flexibility in wrestling. and I was able to have some success. Like if I had a couple more years to wrestle in high school, I would have been really good, you know. But then again, what 19-year-old isn't really good at high school wrestling, you know? But I mean, anyway, I got the bug. I loved wrestling. I loved grappling. Always had that martial arts like mystique. And I wanted to keep going with wrestling when high school was over, but it was over, and I went to college, and the college where I was at didn't have a wrestling team, didn't have a wrestling program, couldn't keep doing it. I was so bummed. You know, I'd go back and I'd work out with like the high school kids and the coaches and stuff during the summer, but that was all I could do. And so like instead, I just got into punk rock music a whole lot more. I was already into music, and drank for a couple of years, and moved to Richmond, Virginia. And when I moved to Richmond, Virginia, VCU had there's a long story, maybe as short as I can, because I mean I don't really talk about this all day. I'm sure you guys are. The short version's okay. It's still as good as the long version.
We got time.
I hear you.
That's all we got.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So anyway, I'll wax philosophical for a while longer. The judo club at VCU is sort of my next destination, and you know, it was really like the judo class that drew me in, because I was like, I was coming to college. I was going to be I was an art major, so really put that degree to good use, you know, over the years. And
But now you're a martial artist, so you can say
the art's right in the name. It's right.
it was worth it.
It was worth it, every penny. You know, so I could take some elective classes. I had started as an engineer. I grew up in South Carolina, went to USC, and you believe it or not, USC didn't have a wrestling program back then. I just don't know why, because it seemed like it should. But ironically, USC had a judo program. I didn't know about that. But anyway, I was looking for wrestling, couldn't find it. Moved to Virginia, switched majors, so I had some extra time to take some classes, because I'd met all of my like electives, but I just felt like I should go ahead and take some more anyway, and kind of be more well-rounded than just taking a bunch of art classes. And I probably didn't want to just drive myself crazy taking like 10 art classes a semester, you know. So judo was one of those things, and I could take it, and it was a free class. And the class was very, you know, it was broad-based, it was very slow, very safe, you know, as it should be. They couldn't afford to risk anybody's any kids being injured or anything. But the club was, you know, became available to me. I became aware that there was this club action going on as well, which was twice a week. But these weren't just like twice a week classes. These were like 2-hour classes, you know, Wednesdays and Sundays. Sunday wasn't open that. So you could just go there and do judo for a couple of hours. And Wednesday was a class format, very structured. Dave Luton was the instructor. He was a Nidan second-degree black belt at the time. Really, really technical guy. So again, that technical mindset of kind of like, you know, leverage can overcome, you know, brute force and stuff like that really stuck with me, really like resonated. I was really lucky to be with a good crew there too, you know. And the club was a really kind of a special place, because we also had this crazy influx of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people, you know, in the area, in surrounding areas that would come, especially since the open mat was open to everybody, you know. I mean, it was, I think the club charged like a $5 mat fee or something for a drop-in. And that was just to raise money for the club, for people that were going to compete or for dues or whatever they had. So like, you know, you had this really technical Wednesday class where we did up on the feet for probably an hour and a half, and then groundwork for 30 minutes. And I mean, I loved the groundwork because it was like wrestling, you know. Up on the feet was like wrestling too, but I think because of the physical attributes I had and the coaching that I had, I did better on the ground, and I probably identified more with like the safety of being close to the ground and everything. But this was I graduated high school in 1993, and I started judo in 1997. So there's kind of that gap in between. I tried to do a little bit of wrestling leading up to it, but I mean, you know, that was the biggest gap I've had in grappling since then by far, you know. And getting involved with the judo club was like the best thing that I could have done at that time. You know, it was just amazing. People were like, blue belts were coming through that were training with us. You know, jiu-jitsu white belts that still knew way more than I did were coming through. And around this time, I was also starting to watch the UFC. I didn't watch UFC 1 when it came out. I watched, the first UFC I saw was like Tank Abbott knocking out John Matua, which was UFC 5, I think.
So this is in Richmond. You said there was a bunch of Brazilians that would come through.
It's in Richmond, yeah, and it was jiu-jitsu people. We didn't have a lot of Brazilians coming through.
Oh.
We had people that were practicing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Wow, 97.
Back then, it was hard to find somebody who, I mean, if you were a blue belt, you were already a badass.
Yeah, it's important to understand the context too. You know, I mean, these guys were like gods to me. You know, I was like, wow, they know so much about this cool, smooth art. You know, and like the judo groundwork that we did was good, man. You know, the guys that were teaching it had a solid wrestling background as well, which we, you know, really fortunate in that regard. And they understood some submissions and things like that. There was, you know, there was triangles, there were arm bars, there were like, you know, Americana, Kimura. You know, like it wasn't just about pinning. It wasn't just about passing a guard, you know. And it was really cool and it was a good outlet. But when I saw the jiu-jitsu people training with them, I was like, oh, that's smooth and slick, and that's kind of more my style. You know, I really like that. So it resonated with me. But I fell in love with judo, man. You know, I really fell in love with it. I loved, um, you know, at a point I was doing some jiu-jitsu and some judo, right? So I was training with jiu-jitsu guys. I was obsessed with jiu-jitsu at this point too. Like a year into judo, I was obsessed with jiu-jitsu as well. I was like, man, that's it. That's what I want, you know. And but you had to watch these grainy ass VHS tapes that you were trading back and forth,
Yeah.
you know, in order to learn anything, and maybe read martial arts magazines. And like once a year, you'd see something cool in there or whatever. It was like, I don't know, Black Belt magazine would have a jiu-jitsu tutorial every sixth issue or something, and it was so hard to see what was going on. You know, it's difficult to understand that today because you open up your phone and you just find out how to counter, you know, a berimbolo, worm guard, you know, whatever. Um, anyway, wasn't like that back then. It was very difficult to learn how to do a basic armbar from the guard for me. You know, I just didn't have access to that kind of information. So I'm giving you guys the long version after all. Sorry about that.
That's
But
okay, man. We want to hear you.
well, the tapes helped a lot. You know, being able to have access to that information did help. So being able to get the VHS tapes, seeing what was going on, watching people doing jiu-jitsu, watching people training, watching
What,
MMA fights.
what was the first set of VHS tapes that you bought or got your hands on? I'm just curious.
Probably, I can't say for sure the first one, but like the Master Series by Mario Sperry with Murilo Bustamante was like the one that was good. You know,
Those are sold in the back of the Karate Black Belt magazine in the Panther section. Yeah.
that's right. Oh
Yeah,
God,
they're awesome.
Panther videos were so bad. I mean, you know, my heart goes out to whoever made those awful videos back then. With like Joe Morera was like, you know, Joe Morera, he's good at jiu-jitsu, man, really good, like really, you know, old school, great, and all that kind of stuff. But like, I swear he put like a whole bunch of marbles in his mouth, and then he would start talking, and they'd film the video. You know, you couldn't hear a thing, and I don't know, man. Even if the videos were like the best of the best, they were still not very good back then, you know. And Mario Sperry and Murillo Bustamante are phenomenal, you know, and the jiu-jitsu they were doing was very like modern by the standards of the day. Those kind of set the standard, but that was, you know, that was it. That's what you got. You know, you could study some VHS tapes, maybe you could practice it with a friend. You know, for us back then, wasn't really a great place for us to train. You know, fast forward a few years, I was competing a bunch in judo, and you know, at first when I started doing judo, I was like, okay, I'll just pin everybody because I knew wrestling and I could do it, and I did really well in local tournaments, just pinning people. Like my base was good. I was a lot bigger. I was like probably 200 pounds. I remember I did a lot of drinking back then, so and event activity for a few years. But I was hard to throw. I was hard to take down, even for pretty good people for whatever reason. But I could pin people when they fell down or they went for a throw and stuff, and probably physically pretty active. Uh, and so I beat people on the ground. And then I fell in love with jujitsu, and so I started like, okay, well these judo guys are really good, but I'm gonna triangle them. You know, I'm gonna armbar them. You could do that a little bit on the ground back then. You know, the rules have changed a lot over the years. But after a while, I was like, you know what, man, I'm just gonna do judo for judo's sake. You know, I'm gonna try to throw these guys, and you know, it was the best thing that I did. I really got I think I got pretty good at throwing for a while. I was Uchimata was one of my jams. I used to love Uchimata. There was one judo tournament where I competed competed against 10 guys, and I threw 9 of them with Uchimata. I'll never forget this. And the one guy that threw me with Uchimata. It was like live by the sword, die by the sword. And incidentally, that was the tournament where I stopped doing Uchimata so much because I went for that one throw toward the end and I spiked my head, going for the throw. And I got the throw, but it was like such a wake up call. Like, okay,
they made that rule now where you can't dive because so many people have hurt themselves with that throw trying to turn your opponent over.
The Uchimata is, let me see, when you
the leg in between, you put your leg, it's a forward moving throw, so your back is against their torso, one leg is in between, trying to like lift them up and scoop
is
them
it
up.
like if you were in the dog fight and you lift your leg?
Yeah, but sure. Sure. You gotta forgive him. He's like his first videos he ever watched were 10th Planet.
Sorry.
Lewis, you're fine, man. That's not a bad analogy. That's not a bad analogy, and Nakapan, your description is fantastic as usual, man. And Uchimata is just one of those throws that, here's a good way to think about it, right? Somebody goes for a single leg on you and they've got your leg and you stand up and maybe you grab the belt, you grab over their collar and you just turn and throw them, and that's what I was driving at was, for a while there in judo, I was doing ground stuff. And then when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, which I was competing before I had like a home base to train at and stuff like that, I was just going out there, just being the Ronin or whatever. I was like, okay, well, I can throw guys, because I was doing judo. And so I was like, all right, I just clocked all these white belts in jiu-jitsu. Like, I got you guys, owned you guys, Then Uchimata was a big one because people would grab your leg like a single leg, right? And so it's really easy to counter a single leg if you got pretty good base and you can just turn and throw the person. But,
not a whole lot of guard to pass afterward if you throw them in the right position.
Absolutely. And that's a really valid point. If you clock somebody pretty good with a throw, and, we're talking like late 90s, early 2000s is when I started competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments. White belts weren't very good back then. I mean, white belts today, some of them are pretty awesome. Some of them are really like athletic and training 6-7 times a week. Like of course they're going to become blue belts eventually, but there's a period where they're just going up, astronomically. And blue belts today, man, wow, compared to what they were like when I was a blue belt. Holy crap, such a dramatic change. But I was like, all right, well, I can throw people that are doing jiu-jitsu with me. Or I could try to do groundwork with them. And so at a point I was like, screw it, man, I'm going to pull guard, I'm just going to play on the bottom and go with that. And it meshed really well with, like, I'd almost thrown myself on my head before this, and like felt that tingle up and down my spine and kind of felt like, oh man, this could have gone really, really badly. I got lucky here. And so I started like going for Sumikaeshi, which is just a sacrifice throw. You can do it off of Uchimata. If your leg is entangled, you can flip the person over you, and I started pulling guard in jiu-jitsu tournaments. And I was like, well, we're doing jiu-jitsu, man. Let's do jiu-jitsu. Let's roll, and not that jiu-jitsu doesn't have takedowns and throws and stuff like that, but I was like, well, if I'm doing jiu-jitsu, I'm going to do jiu-jitsu. If I'm doing judo, I'm going to do judo. And it was a good decision, I think, at that moment, especially since I still had a few more good years of competing in judo. Judo is a lot harder on your body than jiu-jitsu, I think, especially as far as competition. It's like a fight when you're out there. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, man. Like,
How far did you get how far in the ranking did you get up in judo?
I got my black belt in judo before I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu. So it was like 2005 or something when I got ranked in judo. I'll have to look back. I'm not 100% sure. It was tough. The judo club that I went to, the rank in judo sometimes is given out a little more liberally in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. I was really, really proud to get it with the judo club that we were at. I thought they did a really good job of kind of slowing everybody down. And like when our students were like yellow belts, which was the first rank in that system, they would do well with, say, green or orange belts from other clubs. And, it's just kind of, that's sort of the environment I think you want to come up in, where you're, you don't get awarded rank like it's candy. You have to kind of earn it.
And that's one of the cool things too, is that, we kind of borrow from that is, that's one of the things that I regret is I never finished my black belt in judo. I'm always trying to like finish, but I was what is it called? The third brown? What is it? Not an EQ? I'm trying to think about whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm one step away from earning the black belt, but I remember coming up to it is that you'd have, there's a body, International Judo Federation, that kind of governs what needs to be done, what knowledge you need to know, what terminology you need to know. There's a written test, but there's also a shiai, which is the tournament, right? So you could rank up through time and knowledge, right? And you could also rank up in competition. So that's usually how I ranked up, is when they had tournament. If you were able to beat, they line you up, right? They line everybody up by belt rank and by weight. And so everybody's lining up. The heavy people lined up to your right. So you had to defeat. If you defeated 5 people in a row by Wazari or Ippon, then you'd get a Batsugan, which is double promotion. So a lot of us were just going through there and getting double promoted and moving up. But I always thought that was an interesting aspect to the graduation process, because it actually incentivized people and encouraged people to compete in order to be able to execute the techniques that in some level of duress. And so I always thought that was neat. But now I think things are changing. The rule set really dictates the way games are played, and I think that's kind of where you're now making the distinction between judo and jiu-jitsu. But I always try to tell people that it was all one and the same at one time, and through evolution we now have Brazilian, it's the sport of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and the sport of judo. And I think that both have pros and cons. But back in the day when we were coming up, knowledge was kind of hard to find. You had to go to the seminar, you had to go to the school, you had to find it and really want to do this thing in order to learn, because information was so scarce. But through that, I think that the people that came up during that time were more well-rounded, in the sense that they could take people down, and they could work on the ground as well. Whereas now, my criticism of sport jiu-jitsu at times is people can just kind of sit down and, depending on the rule set, scoot towards you and not really work on the takedown part of it. But all fights start standing up. And if you were to read some of the essays that Jigoro Kano had written, he was always saying that tachiwaza, stand up, is the first thing that you should learn before learning the groundwork. Because if you kind of get it, you focus a lot on the groundwork, you kind of this other side that kind of initiates the combat between the two, you're missing, and it's like an important part of that game. So good to know that you've been training judo for so long.
I've heard somebody say, how are you going to be a specialist in ground fighting, but you can't take the fight to the ground?
Yeah.
Like, there you go.
You gotta be able to do it. You can't just sacrifice throws are good. Pulling guard may not be as useful on the street, but it is an option. But you got to be, again, have all the different tools at your disposal so that you can use them depending on the situation.
Yeah, especially at Beta, we all make fun of everyone that pulls guard, so we have to learn to try to take each other down. And I thought you were throwing
full guard. You got to be able to full guard too.
I mean, I guess, but are you making fun of me because when we social distance trained, it looked like I fell down?
You fell down. You attempted to throw and you fell down.
It was terrible.
I used my mind bullets put you down yesterday. It was great. But we're getting off subject. Going back to your judo and jiu-jitsu transition.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so I mean that's a good point too. The rules of the sport are going to dictate how it's played. That's just kind of probably the shortest version of that. So people are rewarded for pulling guard in jiu-jitsu nowadays, right? It's difficult to pass the guard, man. Really difficult, And I've heard propositions for like different types of rule sets that reward, scoring and everything. I mean, my heart always goes back to, I love the submission only, right? Because there's no confusion and all that kind of stuff. It's not spectator friendly. It's not for people that are tuning in and watching, especially if you do no time limits like U.S. grappling does, right? I mean, like, no BS, no 15 minutes and then there's points, none of that kind of stuff. Those are not, in my view, not really submission only. Those are submission only except for if there's points. That's just a regular points event,
They talk about EBI. People are like, yeah, I finished you. I choked you out in EBI rules. But yeah, but like that was an overtime, and the overtime happens in 10 minutes,
It's terrible. They let you take the back.
Yeah, but you start on the arm lock or the back, and then the different.
That doesn't
it's
count.
not submission only. But we're kind of skipping ahead, but that's kind of leads into your creation of U.S. grappling. And then I think one of the trailblazers and first people to bring about submission only type tournaments, no time limit, to our area. One in which we competed against each other. I think that one, and you beat me with Kimura an hour and a half into our match. So that was it was
That was a crazy match to watch. By the way, that was insane. It was 2 hours, man. You guys are crazy.
Yeah. He got the best of me that day. I did compete for an hour and a half before that, but but
you know what it was? It was you rolled nogi with that guy with the dreads, and you couldn't choke him
because
so
he had
the hair was in the way of all the chokes.
None of the guillotines worked.
Yeah,
so that was very exhausting. But yeah, it's okay. It happens, man. And I learned a lot from that. You know, you got to drink water. Got to make sure electrolytes are good, and don't mess with Andrew Smith because he will get you.
Well, we should point out there were some extenuating circumstances for sure behind that day. But I mean, you know, I love the format. You know what I mean? Like I learned so much from that match too. Because I mean, how can you not roll with somebody for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, whatever? It's crazy. But I learned so much from every single match that I've ever had in submission only too. Just looking out there and thinking, okay, you know, you're going to get a submission in this match, or they're going to submit you. There's no in between. There's no controversy. You know, the only controversy is like I didn't really tap or something. You know, I mean, those are minimal compared to like you're going to hear every third match. Oh man, I would have won, but the ref really screwed me. Or you know, I got taken down. The guy took me down after we shook hands, and you know, I started out -1 advantage, and I shouldn't have had that. You know, he shouldn't have had that advantage or whatever. There's just none of that kind of stuff with the submission only. And
I think the mental aspects of a submission only type tournament too are completely different. Where you know I could go in and just be athletic for 6 minutes and just really pander to the rules and win by an advantage. You know, and step in and call myself the champion. Or I got to go in there. It's like I really got to beat this guy, and he has to tap, and the results are absolute. You know, that's it. There's no argument about it. That person was better that day, and I really like that. There's such a mind to it, you know.
Yeah, you can't just say, all right, I outran the person today, or I out cardioed the person. I mean, yeah, you can say you out cardioed them, but let's be honest, man. I think being patient and having the right technique and the right timing is more important than your cardiovascular health. It's not that your cardio is not important. I think a lot of people miss that when they're preparing for submission only tournaments. They kind of say, okay, well, I got to go and run a lot, or you know, I got to do some CrossFit working out or something. And like, I don't know, man. I think you kind of have to just roll a whole bunch and just kind of relax a lot. You know, not allow yourself to be put in compromising positions. Be careful. Stay focused. You can't really lose your mental focus, but it really is a mental grind as much as anything else. But you know, man, Nakapan, that's one of the things I've always really thought highly about you about with your martial arts. You know, yes, you have the body of a bronzed god. You know, like you're a beast, man. You're a specimen. You can, you know, you look the part. You are the part. You can move quickly. You're strong. All these things, flexible, man. I've always, you know, I better stop talking now because I'm gonna go off on a tangent here, thinking about how awesome you are. You know, but every single time I've rolled with you, I've been struck by how smooth your jiu-jitsu is and how you don't try to play this game when you're rolling. You know, it's like you've got these attributes, but you're paying attention to the technical flowing aspects of it. And every time we've rolled, you know, it's been move, 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 move. You know, like if you have the physical attributes, you can go out there and you can just be like, move, move, move. You know, okay, your turn, right? But that's not really the way jiu-jitsu is played. That's not really the game, you know, in terms of pushing the sport forward, pushing the art. Probably have to draw a distinction between the art and the sport. And so I think that's really what appeals to me with submission only is more, it's much more of like a conversation, you know, and less of a staccato attack of one person and then, you know, oh, I outran you, I out physicaled you, I outdid this, you know. There's some of that in submission only, but not quite the same as with a sport jiu-jitsu match that has 5 or 6 minutes to it, you know.
That's why I appreciate you, man. You know, you're always trying to push the limits of what we're doing and bring about like this, you know, innovation, revolution, you might say, right? As opposed to So yeah, I just where submission only, where I really do enjoy that format, and I think that that has so many important aspects to development of martial artists. Um, one of the things also in that, as we were talking about, like having to get to the submission, making sure that like you are committed in your mind, to the finish of the match. Very important. I think the longest match recorded in U.S. grappling was 3.5 hours, though, right? That was one of the yeah.
It was right at 3 hours, and this was horrible for the owners because it was during like the third event that we ever ran, and so like the third submission only event. This was back in 2008, and we found a format. We were like, this is great. We had read a statistic from maybe Florian Gracie, who had run no time limit matches on a very, very small scale in Brazil years and years ago. And he said basically that the average match length was like, I want to say it was like 7 minutes, because, you go out there and you're thinking, okay, well, this could last a long time. Let me just go for a submission. And a lot of the time you're going to get a submission that's quicker than if you were in a points match where you're being a little more conservative and you're worried about the points and stuff like that. And of course, there's some that just drag out and take a long time.
The other thing is you think scientifically, you look at the data, and the beautiful thing now is I think you've gotten a lot of data from what is the most common submission to how long these matches go. And my experience at the U.S. grappling events is that they even though it's no time limit, they pretty much finish by like 7 o'clock. So, I mean,
yeah, with some notable exceptions for sure, and that's the thing. It's about like it averages out to be like a normal length tournament, but it's kind of more about the median, because you're going to have some crazy outliers that are those longer matches. And the problem there, that from a logistical standpoint, is running the next match, right? And like if you've got a division with 16 people in it or something, so you've got 8 matches in the first round, right? It's not called the quarterfinals, whatever that is, right outside of the quarterfinals. You're running a match. You can't run the quarterfinals until all those matches are done, or at least until your opponents are ready, right? So everybody has to wait. And then like if you're doing 2 divisions, like you're doing gi and no gi, and you have the no gi going early, you have a long ass no gi match. Well, the gi is going to have to wait too, right? It's going to have another hour long or 2 hours long or whatever, however long of a delay. And my hats are off to the folks that are really involved with U.S. grappling now, because I've been really like a silent partner for several years now, probably 3 or 4 years now, at least. John Telford Bagels, he's heavily involved with the running of U.S. grappling. He's a Revolution BJJ black belt as well, and he just had a baby, just moved to North Carolina. He's living the life. Brian and Chrissy Lindsay, who've been business partners for me for a long time with U.S. grappling. Those guys, going back in time just a little bit, U.S. grappling sort of loosely came about in 2006. We kind of slowly came together over the years. Brian and Chrissy and I were friends, and we were natural partners and stuff like that. It ended up working out okay, but we also sort of founded a company during the middle of a financial crisis, and we didn't really know that we were in the middle of a financial crisis. And so it was a tough several years for us to sort of build up very slowly and gradually over time to get to the point where it was like a sustainable business. And I mean, it's not like it's a vastly profitable empire or something like that. I think a lot of people look in from the outside and they say, man, U.S. grappling has a lot of competitors and therefore they make a lot of money. That's that's sort of the fallacy that a lot of people, I think, look in from the outside of any business and say, the owners must be rolling in the dough. It is tough to run a business, man. And you run all the risk, and if something like COVID happens, you're just destroyed and devastated. And people just don't really, I think a lot of people don't really understand that until they run a business. There's just nothing like it. Sorry.
No, I would say there's so many
Yeah.
ways.
I got 2 things too. I want to talk about that 3-hour match. I hope that was an advanced division and it wasn't a bunch of white belts.
It was white belts, I think.
Was it white belts?
I think it was advanced no gi.
I hope.
Is it?
There, yes, because this ended up being a very unusual circumstance. Both of the people bowed out at the same time. They agreed at the 3-hour mark not to continue.
Wow.
It was not a submission that was imminent. Yeah, and I remember at least one of the people that was in it, but I don't want to say his name just because it might be kind of I don't think it's embarrassing, but yeah, I mean, he may or may not want me to bring his name up because, but they agreed, not to continue at the 3-hour mark, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable conclusion to draw. Like, when we hit 3 hours, when they hit 1 hour, they were like, "No, we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna finish this guy."
Wow.
2 hours.
No, I'm good.
And we also,
you want to stop? I want to stop. You want to stop? Okay.
Now, and I do want to mention something about that. The other thing I wanted to say about the submission only is that, going back to, we were talking about how the rules dictate how the game is played. Yes, in a 5-minute or 6-minute time frame, you could be very athletic. Even in wrestling, when you're talking about like you have to attack all the time, and now that's kind of moved to judo. That's kind of moved to jiu-jitsu, even in the sense that it's not even about the art. When we're talking about the sport, now it's about almost like the spectators, because the spectators want action, and it's forcing the players to do something that they might not otherwise do. A, just being athletic, or B, like attacking just for the sake of attacking, or looking like you're trying to attack so that you don't get penalized by the judge. And I think that the submission only brings it more back to the art, in the sense that, like, now this is kind of how, they had this, Jigoro Kano had envisioned judo and how he had practiced it, is that, you have to be gentle, right? You have to be yielding. If somebody is going hard and pushing forward, like, you pull back and take their energy against them. And so that's kind of the idea for martial art, for how a smaller person can defeat a bigger person. But now you're taking all these things away by saying, okay, these both people got to be almost the same weight. They got to be fighting all the time. They got to be going for each other. And that's they're not expressing themselves so much now, as that they are trying to win the favor of not only the referee, but, the fans. So I think that, you've done a great thing with US Grappling, and, your ideas of how you run it, and the team that runs it, that you can tell it's all based on the fact that they love what they're doing. So, and that's what makes it run, even if it's not making $1 million, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I stepped away. I mean, I realized that, the team that was running it, they were going to do a good job for the competitors, and that was the number one thing that I'd always been worried about. And when we started it initially, it was like, well, we looked around and we're like, there was nothing like it. There were some tournaments that were out there. First of all, like, you'd have to drive, 8 hours to compete if you wanted to most of the time. I mean, like, for us, like, New Jersey was a hot spot for tournaments, like Grapplers Quest and Naga. Florida was a hot spot for tournaments. Nashville, for me, I would go to Nashville sometimes. And of course, I got to give a shout out to the Beltsville Judo crew, man. Those guys up there, Edwin Takamori.
Yep.
I forget his father's name. He passed away several years back, but
His
those guys
brother, James Takamori, that's who I was training judo with.
Yeah, man, really like
Love it.
Good bunch of folks. They ran good, solid judo tournaments, and they just did it for the love of the sport, man. As far as I can tell, because I know there's no money in that,
You can compete for $20. It just gets people there to do it. That's it. They're not in it for the money. Even the clubs, the clubs are just there, paying for the space, and they have people there, and they're awesome group of people that are just trying to spread the art of judo.
It was amazing. If it wasn't for those guys, I would have not been able to compete anywhere near as much. And some of the other local tournaments, like there was Commonwealth Games had a judo tournament back in the day. I did that one several times. There was Virginia State judo tournament that traveled around from location to location. I was able to compete in that. So like anytime I didn't have to leave the state to compete, I was super duper happy, And I mean, I also have to give a quick shout out to Eric Berto for opening up Richmond BJJ around this time in 2002. I was there for the first class, and leading up to it, I mentioned I was just sort of traveling around and training at other locations, traveling out of town with some friends, and actually that's where Nakapan, that's where we met, up at Yamasaki Academy in probably late 90s. You were a purple belt, so I'm guessing 1999, it may have been 2000, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was a white belt. You were one of the first purple belts I ever rolled with, and I was like, whoa, this guy's smooth, man, because like we were exposed to blue belts who we thought were great, but then they were kind of like just, aggressive, but they were just smoother than we were. And like, you just didn't get access to higher level people back then. So anyway, that was a little bit of an aside. But like for me, it was I would travel to go get this information, look at the VHS tapes, read the magazines. Eric opened up Richmond BJJ Academy. I had a home. I was super happy about that. I was there for the first class. We all, a bunch of us in the Richmond area that were a big part of the judo club, supported him in this venture, and we were really happy to have a place that we could call home. And that was my home for several years. And like Eric and I went to Brazil together in 2004. I went back in 2005, and then I opened up Revolution BJJ in 2006, and also U.S. Grappling sort of got it started around the same time. So for me, that was a very busy, like, building up a few years leading up to that stuff.
We talked about.
Well, I was just going to say that sort of colors the context of how the tournament scene got up and running. I filled in a few gaps because I think it's important because I was out there traveling and compete. I was obsessed with competing. Went to like definitely over 100 jiu-jitsu tournaments and as many judo tournaments as I could just to see. And I mean, it meant you'd have to travel. It meant you'd have to spend a lot of money to get to these places that were not well-run tournaments. That was a big reason why U.S. Grappling got started. That's why we wanted to do what we did, because we saw that there just wasn't really a service for the community, and certainly not on a local level. And furthermore, you might have 200 competitors and you'd be there until 2 a.m. I mean, there were literally tournaments that would go on until 2 a.m. I'm not exaggerating.
I've been to many of those, and they used to be some of the IBJJF tournaments that they would finish at like 4 in the morning. I mean, the one time I went to the Pan Ams, it was in Florida, and they decided they were trying to save money. So instead of a 2-day tournament, they tried to make it 1 day. But the contract like started the next day at 5 in the morning. They pushed it as far as they could in the morning. And it was crazy. And then the weigh-in was nuts too, where, it was back then, it was just a mob of people. There was no line, and they were just lined up, and there was a door that would open for 30 seconds. And Conan Silveira would come out and pull his like jiu-jitsu Brazilian buddies and pull them in there so they can weigh in first, while everybody else was kind of outside trying to like fight their way to get in this door. So, I mean, I remember those days very well. So I appreciate everything that, you and US Grappling have done for the sport of jiu-jitsu.
We were talking about how Professor Andrew got his judo black belt, but we never jumped back to how he got his jiu-jitsu black belt. And you also do Muay Thai. But we haven't heard that yet.
Well, so judo got my black belt. The other thing about judo that's interesting is for us, we had to test. We had to do the Nage no Kata. That was like the toughest thing for me.
Yeah.
The competition was pretty easy. Like it was just fun. I went out there and I had fun. I threw people, got thrown some, whatever. Won some, lost some. But the test was tough, man, because you had to do all these moves right. It was more, for me back then, it was more like dance than it was like martial arts. You had to very coordinate it with your partner. Since then, I regret not understanding this when I was testing, but since then I've come to understand the kata is a really great tool for learning, for understanding why you do the moves in a particular order and things like that, But because our club was so competition oriented and like we just were learning the techniques and everything, that wasn't really articulated to me as well as maybe it could be, or it was articulated to me and I didn't want to hear it, maybe, because how that goes, right? So anyway, that was the judo black belt. The jiu-jitsu black belt, I was training with Eric for years and years. Good friend of mine. He introduced me to Julio Fernandez, his instructor.
Shout out to Eric and Liz, awesome people.
Yep. They're great people. And Julio Fernandez has been sort of a mentor, like the godfather of the BJJ Revolution team. He's been to Richmond like 20 times, maybe more now, maybe like 30 times, because he's been to Eric's gym and my gym many times. And so when Julio came in 2008 is when I got my black belt from him. Really with Eric's blessing, Eric was my boy. He was my buddy. We trained together. He was my mentor in jiu-jitsu for many years. And, Eric is like a scrawny, he looks like Daniel Russo. He's like the Karate Kid, So the wax on, wax off thing is very much up Eric's arena. As you guys know, Eric, he's much more, this is going to sound crazy, much more muscular, much more physically fit now than he was in like 2002, 2003. I mean, he was a very scrawny guy. Like jiu-jitsu helped him build up to the person that he is now. And so, like,
Still a vegan.
Still a vegan.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. All right, why don't you guys calm down?
It's a very serious lifestyle for Eric and Liz, and I love them for having integrity. Always having the integrity to stand up for what they think is right. And so anyway, I got really good technical understanding from Eric too. And so like Julio is not a giant. Although he's a physical guy, he's also extremely technical. My wrestling coach was technical. My judo coach was technical. I've been extraordinarily lucky in the people that I've become involved with. I don't think that it's just me picking these people. I think I was really, really lucky to have these mentors in my life to help me understand how important it is to really focus on, being technical and overcoming this stuff. Plus all those cool movies during the 80s that I watched when I was a kid, that really set me down that path. Now, Muay Thai is a different art. To me, Muay Thai is very different. Like, you've got to be much more like aggressive. You have to be, although there is a lot of the technical aspect of moving out of the way and getting all that kind of stuff. But full disclosure, I trained Muay Thai seriously for 3 or 4 years. Like, I did not have the bandwidth after a certain point to keep going with it. Didn't love it the way I love Jiu-Jitsu. I love what it does. I love how it looks. I love its effectiveness, but I don't love doing it, and I did it for several years because I felt like it was an obligation to understand it. I wanted to have a Muay Thai program at our gym because I thought it was the right thing to do for the students, to have a well-rounded martial arts experience for people coming in.
Perhaps also that the idea of, jiu-jitsu was to us during that time was fighting. Yeah, it was like actual fighting. And so we needed to have striking, grappling, clinching, wrestling, that type of stuff. And I guess our mindsets were a little bit different there and then, which is what we need to find whatever art is effective and learn that so that, we could be as effective as possible and also pass it on to the students.
That's a really good point. In the late 90s in particular and on into the 2000s, the culture of jiu-jitsu blended in with the culture of MMA, and so if you walked in and you wanted to do MMA, you had to know jiu-jitsu, and if you wanted to do jiu-jitsu, you had to know MMA. I mean, I think if you want to do MMA, you still have to know jiu-jitsu, but if you were coming in to do jiu-jitsu, it was like, okay, well, we're going to do dealing with punches and clinching today. Like, that's all we're going to do is, clinching. And then tomorrow we're going to deal with punches on the ground, from the guard and escaping side control without getting elbowed in the head, and stuff like that. Stuff that you don't really see very much of today in most jiu-jitsu schools, And so because the community was so small and so tight-knit, and there was such a small group of people that were doing it, MMA and jiu-jitsu were basically the same, were very close to the same. You would have schools that had a culture of let's beat each other up, let's swim with the sharks and see who's left after all the blood's in the water, and that was like how you got started doing jiu-jitsu back then. And if you did it, you were tough, man. Everybody who did jiu-jitsu in the 90s and in the early 2000s too, they were tough. Let's say pre-Ultimate Fighter days, you were absolutely 100% guaranteed to be tough or crazy, or probably both if you stuck with jiu-jitsu for a while. So, when jiu-jitsu started growing exponentially, and I think that we saw probably 2 waves of that. First was the UFC when it first became on air, in the early 90s, and then on into the late 90s, it became more popular. It kind of jumped up. And then the Ultimate Fighter, when it was on television, the reason why I reference that is because it became, not overnight, but pretty quickly, like a household name. All of a sudden, people knew what MMA was. And this is, I guess, 2005-ish. It went from maybe 100,000 practitioners to more than 1 million over the course of a couple of years, and maybe less than that, And so for me, when Revolution BJJ opened up, I realized that there was, let me rephrase that, long after Revolution BJJ opened up, I realized there was a better way to integrate people in there, and you didn't have to have this sink or swim mentality. That was very much ingrained in me from the beginning, because I think it was all over jiu-jitsu culture. There wasn't a way to avoid it. But what that ultimately did was it brought jocks and hard-headed people out, but it didn't allow for the Daniel LaRusso types and the wax on, wax off, Kwai Chang Caine, whatever, the ninjas, if you will, the ones that I wanted to be. It didn't allow them to be cultivated. And the reason why I say cultivated is because a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner isn't necessarily the type of person that is going to respond when somebody headbutts them with another headbutt. It could be the type of person that says, "Ow, that really hurts. I need a few days. I don't want to do this stuff anymore." Maybe you can avoid having that person get headbutted in the beginning, and kind of coddle them a little bit. This is going to sound awful to old school guys, probably. People are going to be watching this and shuddering and listening to it and thinking like, this is terrible. But I don't think it's terrible, because I think that toughness is something that you can learn over time, even if you're an adult and you never played tackle football when you were a kid like I did. You didn't, get into fights or whatever. You can cultivate the toughness over time. Further, and more to the point, you can learn to be safe with people. I think that's the real bottom line for me is, what we want from our students at Revolution is we want our people to be able to do this stuff for the rest of their lives. We want them to be able to train forever. And the way that we trained in the 90s, the way that I trained in the 90s, man, I couldn't be doing that today, much less for another 30, 40 years. I'd like to be in my 80s doing jiu-jitsu. I'd like to be able to beat up 20-year-olds that are coming at me, or at least survive, right? At least survive.
With this soft generation, I think that's going to be possible. No, okay. No, but I think to your point, yes. As martial artists, and the purpose of martial arts, we always say, is to make the weak stronger. It's not to weed out the weak.
Right, and I think that that's the other thing. Like you can have smoothness, and you can cultivate toughness, and not have just weakness. Not have a wimpy generation or whatever of people. You just have to show them how not to be assholes, basically.
Yes.
If you can show people how not to be assholes, and also learn how to flow, and also learn, those are the types of people that I think you want having these powerful techniques, on their sides.
I think that kind of always the full circle of martial art is, this would say the code of conduct, or like a Bushido, like how to conduct yourself, how to behave, and now in the absence of any kind of moral code that we have in our country, like this is time more important than ever to have some way to conduct yourself and how to treat your neighbor, and so while that is also dangerous, it's a dangerous area, because sometimes you get into this risk of like hero worship, or one person, their ego starts to get big, then you kind of already forgot about these teachings, that we were talking about. But yeah, I can see where cults get created behind that. But at the same time, like, we have to understand why this code of conduct is here, is not to be a bunch of hooligans abusing our power, because that's really what we're given now through being able to, use our hands this way, yeah, or our bodies as weapons. So you make a really good point with that, is just don't be an asshole.
That's it in a nutshell,
That's going to be it.
On your martial arts code of conduct.
Don't be an asshole.
Well, I think, for me, a lot of the lessons that you learn in martial arts are kind of like set in credos or whatever, that's the way you think of it. Like, you say, if you're in Cobra Kai, you say, fear does not exist in this dojo or whatever, but most martial arts schools are kind of like, I will practice X, Y, Z, the kindness and gentleness toward people that I'm stronger than, or something like that. Some kind of a general, I'll be a good person, you know. With jiu-jitsu, we don't have that. You know, what we have instead is the lessons that you actually learn on the mat. And I do think that there's a great deal of merit in that, right? You, of course, you learn, you know, patience. We already touched on that a little bit. You learn tenacity for sure. You can't just quit. And that's something that, you know, my argument is you kind of learn that over time. It doesn't happen overnight, you know. You don't necessarily want to rule out the people that are less tenacious in the beginning, because you can, it's a thing that you can build up. It's an attribute that you can build up over time in people. But you kind of learn humbleness, humility, you know, super duper important. You learn, I mean, hopefully you learn that. Not everybody not everybody who does jujitsu learns humility, but most people do, I think, because there's always somebody out there that can beat you up. You know, you learn mercy, you know, and how to be gentle, and how to be, how to take care of your partners, how to take care of people. Oftentimes, you learn a sense of community from jujitsu, you know, and so like for me, it's about, um, you're not going to say out loud a credo. You're going to learn a lot of the lessons on the mat, but what can you do to put the spotlight on these lessons as well at your academy? You know, I think that to me is largely what we try to do at Revolution, you know, and I see a lot of that at Beta too, you know, trying to, you know, turn the focus on what is it that makes you into a more ethical, better person, and a better training partner, you know, just creating a better culture. Culture is really the word, you know, that's the word of the day. Trey Martin, my business partner, my buddy, been friends with Trey for a very long time. Trey is a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu now. I just got his third degree last year. It's awesome to see him promoted. We've been friends forever. Trey had his gym, and I had my gym, and we eventually merged together in like 2010. I think it was 2010. And that is like sort of the more modern iteration of what Revolution BJJ is, versus me just running my own smaller thing over here, him running his own smaller thing over here. And that's part of the reason why the gym's much bigger now than it used to be.
But now you have two schools. Yeah. When Ashland?
We do. Yes. So, you know, when Trey and I merged, we saw that our culture was really similar, and that's why it was going to work. You know, we both were, we were a little hard-headed back then, but we also understood enough that we had to cultivate this culture. We had to build up the students over time. When we started the gym with Jarrett, this was Jarrett's baby, you know, Revolution BJJ Ashland. January of 2019, he opened his doors. You know, once again, fantastic timing. We did not understand there was going to be a global pandemic within a year. We didn't get that. But nevertheless, Jarrett's a workhorse. He was able to build up his location, you know, in a very short time, to like 85 students, you know, which is just unheard of for me anyway, for a very short time. It took us like 6 years to get to 85 students, you know, and then we sort of expedited it and grew exponentially after that. But he was able to work really, really hard. We have some pretty good systems in place too. And Jared is just a great martial artist. He's a great dude. I've always looked up to him too. He was one of those guys that was coming to the judo club in the relatively early days, around 2000 or so. And one of the guys I certainly looked up to when he was a blue belt, and I was just a terrible white belt, you know.
I always tell Jared he should run for senator or something, some kind of Congress, some kind of political office. He's just a all around nice guy.
He'll never do it. And, you know, Jared, I have to give him a ton of credit. Jared does a fantastic job of being like, you know, apolitical. I do a good job inside of the gym, or a pretty good job inside of the gym, with trying to be, the biggest thing that I want is for everybody to feel comfortable there, you know? And I think it's important that people of different mindsets are able to come together, do martial arts under one roof, and be able to see that there are other points of view. You know, I feel like everybody has a fuller point of view after understanding that, you know, the person that believes something different from you isn't necessarily your enemy just because they believe something different from you, right? And of course, there are things that, like outright racism or sexism or whatever, that really is going to make somebody your enemy in the real world. But for the most part, generally, people believe a lot of the same stuff, you know, and they have the same sort of underlying code of human ethics. And when they get in the same place and they realize that, it just kind of helps with the atmosphere and stuff like that. Me personally, I can't help myself sometimes with my social media profiles and stuff, and that's on me. But like inside of the gym, it's a very different matter. I think that it's important for us to just all kind of allow people to come together and again learn those lessons that the mat teaches you. When we're talking about jiu-jitsu, I think it teaches you quite a bit. Going with the flow, moving out of the way of stuff that is overwhelming and stuff like that.
This
People
is
just
where
don't
this
want to do that.
this this is where I think that having schools, martial arts schools, jujitsu schools are important as well. Because as you said, it's like a melting pot of all these different socioeconomic backgrounds that come together with different ideas. Whereas now, the pandemic has kind of made that difficult, and B, kind of polarized people between two ideas, and really kind of pitting people against each other. Whereas kind of what you said, once we do come together in the same room, we're doing something that we find that we're actually all alike, more alike and agree than you think.
Yes,
So,
100%. And that's hard to do with social media. And we have to talk about social media a little bit because it's the primary means over which most people are communicating today. Before the pandemic, I think in-person conversation was much more likely to happen. There are still people who are doing in-person conversations. They're able to travel. There are many more who are not, who are stuck at home. I haven't gone to the grocery store, since March. I can order food on through delivery, and get it delivered to my house for the same price or for $10 more. That's what I'm going to do. I just don't think it's worth the unnecessary risk personally.
Have you guys opened up?
Revolution BJJ, both locations are open. HQ, the main one that my child is running solo classes right now. We're probably going to transition over to partner specific, like you get one partner or one designated partner that you're stuck with for a while. We're going to be very slow and conservative with it. My biggest fear as a gym owner is having to go backwards. This is something that Nakapan and I talk about all the time. If we were to move forward to small group classes, let's say where you have a couple of different partners, and then there's a spike in cases, or somebody pops positive at our gym, or the governor says you guys have to go back a phase. I think it would be devastating for people who had gotten accustomed to being able to train with multiple partners to have to go back to either one partner or zero partners, especially zero partners. Like going from being able to roll with somebody to being able to not train with somebody again, that's a really rough thing to do once you come back into it.
So you guys,
struggling right now. We have been open for 3 weeks now. So we're doing solo, socially distant, no contact training, which, Muay Thai we can do. We have people on bags. We're doing workouts, working on technique, flexibility, so we're able to do that. Jiu-Jitsu, of course, is kind of a different animal in the sense that you would really do need someone to drill with, train with. Although we can do, plenty of break falls, technical get-ups, movements, and things of that nature for a while. But yeah, I agree with you. Like once you go forward, it's difficult to go back. Do you guys have a time frame when you think you're going to do paired partners yet, or?
Well, the paired partners, it looks like it's going to be able to happen in the relatively soon, relative short future. Ashland has already got some paired partner training going on, and so the demographics in Ashland, it's actually Hanover County, which if you go to the Virginia Department of Health, is called the Chickahominy Health District. The percent positive for testing is lower there. There's very, very few hospitalizations due to COVID there. And so we feel much, much better about running classes with a partner in Ashland. At HQ at Staples Mill, we are, first, we're not charging the members right now for July. We just decided this is the thing that we're not going to do. We do have Zoom classes that we're running that people are paying money for if they want to. And those are going well, and I'm having a good time. I'm actually taking care of the adult classes right now. I don't really do anything with kids. But I think that we're going to be able to move to partner classes in the relative near future as well, depending on the percent positives. So the two metrics that we settled on after talking with Like Chris Moriarty's been very vocal about this. He's a doctor, black belt jiu-jitsu. If you don't know, he was a very high-level competitor for a number of years. Um, Speaking with epidemiologist friends, other doctors, and just following the lead of other gym owners who've been down this road, we're looking at number of hospitalizations in our area for COVID, which is a leading indicator to deaths, and percent positives. And so if the percent, paying more attention, we're being a little more diligent than what we're allowed to do. We could be running classes with partner training right now. We could be running classes with more contact and get away with it for sure. Other gyms in the area are doing it, and that's their decision.
Yeah.
I don't really, it's a very complicated issue, and I don't really want to pass judgment on any other gyms for doing what they want to do, because this is also about survival as a business, and for some of these folks, it's putting food on the table, and so I get it. As long as there are some steps being taken to keep people safe, I respect that. It's a decision that you have to make. We're in a little bit of a different situation with Revolution BJJ because it's like the biggest gym in the state for jiu-jitsu. And so if you look at where's a hot spot likely to be, where's it likely to be next, jiu-jitsu schools got to be really close to the top of the list for that. If you have a lot of contact training, you have several hundred people that are in contact with one another, floating from partner to partner to partner to partner. If we were just to say no holds barred, everybody can just roll with everybody, I have little doubt that we would become a hot spot for COVID. And I don't think that it's necessarily a death sentence if you're under a certain age. I think that testing positive, you're very likely to survive. I do have concerns about what it means if you survive, though, if you recover. Are you more likely to get cancer at some point in the future? And are you likely to be susceptible to other illnesses and things of that nature? So for me, I take it really seriously, and I feel a strong obligation because we have so many members that are going to be in one place at a time. Ashland's a little different. It's a smaller location too. We've scaled up. We're approaching like 100 members, but it's not like it's multiple hundreds of people in there every week crossing paths. And I think that's really the thing that that's why we've decided to be so freaking conservative with this thing and be very careful about this.
It's very, very, very difficult to navigate, with the conditions being what they are. And also, like, we're in DC, so DC seems to be extremely, extremely conservative with these types of things. But our number one responsibility is to our community, trying to keep everybody safe. But we do feel the pressure also in that, people do want to train with somebody. So at this point, we're trying to figure out when that would be possible. And so Lewis, like just Virginia, I mean, it seems like it's almost like the Wild Wild West in some areas. You're seeing people, you almost do whatever. You guys are in phase 3. You're almost there. For us, everybody's talking about having a vaccine before people can even make contact. So, I'm just, a lot of these things are also made by people, some bureaucrats sitting behind a desk who don't really know much of anything. So it's difficult. It's really I think the responsibility is on each person, right? So, I mean, for us, we just got to make sure everybody stays safe. Well, what is our case count at, Lewis?
So, I mean, the past 3 weeks, it's been in the 30s every day, averaging about 30 new cases a day.
We got 700,000 people in DC.
Right. So this week, it's not looking too good. It's actually gone up. It looks like we're averaging somewhere around 55 to 60 a day. So there has been an increase in DC. I mean, the numbers are not out of control. It's not like, remember when Chicago had like 10,000 new cases? It's not like that. But, it's still an increase.
There's 10,000 cases total in DC.
Yeah, right now there's like 10,800 total cases from, that's all the way going back to, March 9th, when they started recording the data. And then, so it looks like we stayed in phase 1 for 3 weeks. We're on our 3rd week of phase 2. But because of the increase, it's probably not going to happen, that we move on. But we are looking at like all the rules, and we're seeing there's some rules about training outside. They say, here's what they say, and here's what I, hold on, I'm trying to.
There's like a 50-page handbook about all the DC.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the rules are, all right, check this out. Tell me what you guys think this means. All right, so this is outdoor training, right? I was thinking, all right, here's what it says. Low to moderate contact sports may occur on a casual basis.
casual basis.
So I don't know what that means.
Don't wear a suit when you work out.
So I think we can maybe do some Muay Thai pads outside as long as we clean in between people. But maybe we could do it like if you're in the same household, you guys can hold pads for each other, like permanent partners for Muay Thai, but only outdoors. Indoors, we're not allowed to do anything. Indoors,
Everything has to be socially distanced indoors.
yeah, indoors, you got to have a mask and you got to be 10 feet apart. So that's like all of our classes right now.
Glad in Virginia. No.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be on a similar trajectory with you guys, not because we have to, because Virginia is, like you said, it's kind of the Wild West, just because we want to be on the safe side. And, you know, you can make the same case about the economy, right? Like people are very eager to get things opened back up and to get back to business. But you can see what's happened if you get a little overzealous, for example, with Florida, Texas, and parts of California and Arizona, I guess, that are having resurgences, and they're going to have to go backwards. And man, business owners are not going to be happy with having to close their doors after they've been open for a little while. You know, that's really a tough spot to be in. So my sort of central argument is like, I'd rather us go only forward and not have to go backward, both from a business point of view and of course from like a training sanity martial arts point of view. You know, it's painful to go this slow. It's irritating to all of us. You know, nobody wants to go this slow.
It's interesting how the government response has put the pressure on basically the people, and then now like making it so that these people are irresponsible. At the same time, like we need to take away the pressure for all the people.
They need to just cancel rent. That's all.
Yeah, you know, just get, you know, why is there rent? Why is there
rent?
Mortgages? I mean, they own the banks anyway, right? So like, what's happening? Instead of making this first come, first serve programs that are really terribly run, that no one's really overseeing, why do that and create all this calamity? I mean, maybe it's all planned. I don't know.
That's it, man. You know, I think business owners would be perfectly happy to shell up a little bit longer if they didn't have such a constraint financially on them.
Yep.
You know, and not having to pay rent. Yeah, you pass the buck to the landlord, but then not necessarily, because if you just kick it up another notch to the banks, you don't have to even screw over the banks. Go bail out the banks. I don't care. Just tell the banks don't charge money for mortgages, right? Mortgage companies tell the landlords don't charge money for rent. Got to kick it up a notch. I mean, we just had to go out on our own and negotiate with our landlord. Like I think the overwhelming majority of business owners are in the same situation. You know, we can't just like hit the snooze button on our rent. That just doesn't happen. You know, and we've been fortunate to be able to have discussions with our landlord. He's a very reasonable guy. You know, if we weren't in that situation, we would be in a much worse spot financially. And I mean, it's not like we had zero revenue for 4 months now. I mean, I say zero. We've had about 10% revenue because we've done online classes and we've done some gear sales and stuff like that. If we had to pay full rent throughout this entire time, it would have been devastating for us. You know, just devastating. We were more careful financially than a lot of other businesses too, and lucky for us, you know, with diligence, smart planning, and just fortune. But
I think that's it's all up to the mortgage holders right now, the landlords. You know, we're in the same boat. We're trying to figure what that is at this point. You know, and I feel like, you know, they don't want to be left holding the ball either, because I understand that industry is one that's taking the hit right now. You know, they're like, well, if we don't get paid, then how are we going to pay our mortgages? I get that. So, you know, we're still in that same boat. We're trying to negotiate. Hopefully it comes out in favor for both of us, looking for the win-win situation. I think maybe perhaps the problem, you know, is that the derivatives, you know, like they've taken all these mortgages, they've cut them up, they've turned them into financial instruments, and they're all around. And so now like those things are out. So if these things don't get paid, what are these things worth? And then the people on Wall Street who own the government are trying to, you know, got to bail themselves out. So, anyway, I'll get off the tin hat. We're already almost at an hour and a half now. I think this has been a great conversation. You really enjoyed having you on here. I think we might have to have a part 2 on this if you don't mind at some point. Talk about other things and catch up on what's happening in our different areas.
Yeah, maybe we talk next month about how it's going, you know, how like schools are going, how classes are going. Because right now we're dealing with a lot of fear. I think people are really scared, and I get it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes, huh?
Every day is a different day. Right now, the media is really hyping up the situation in all these different areas. When I say hype up, I mean like it's all that we're seeing, you know, really. So I understand the concern, and we're definitely seeing a bit of a decline in some of the classes, but hopefully, like, you know, as our numbers in DC hold steady and your numbers in Virginia continue to improve, that people come back to training, and, you know, we take the right precautions and keep each other safe. Because, you know, while we were all classified as a non-essential business, I think through this conversation we have realized that, you know, what the schools provide is something really important, and that people do need, and we continue to have to, you know, we need to continue to have these conversations and keep everybody working together and keep martial arts alive, man. So with that, I really do appreciate you coming on, and I hope that we can get together in the next couple of weeks again and continue this conversation, man. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences with martial arts with your students. We're going to put this on so they can learn a little bit more about you, because, man, like I think throughout this whole time, like, we've known each other for nearly 20 years now. I see you as a brother, man. We talk to each other every month, you know, just trying to bounce ideas and, you know, checking on each other. And I really do appreciate you. And that wouldn't have been possible with this great thing that we call, you know, martial arts. So, man, thank you for being a part of my life. And thank you for being on the show, man.
Well, Nakapan, it's always a pleasure, man. You know, you're a great guy, and I can feel that through the magic of Zoom and Facebook or whatever. You know, and to your point about the media, very briefly, you know, everybody should remember, 1, we do need the media, because otherwise we have to listen to the government the entire time. But 2, the media is out there to make money. You know, they're out there to make money. So, you know, study the data and make your own informed decisions, but don't go crazy. You know, it's not the end of the world, right? We're going to get through this. We always do. We always have. And Lewis, you did a great job taking that abuse in the beginning with the magnificent mustache that you have. You gotta say.
Wear it proudly.
I am not getting rid of this for a while. If US Grappling has some tournaments, you're gonna see this there too.
All right, so with that being said, have a great day and stay safe out there.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Love you guys.